Hello again. Thanks for stopping by Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode 101, and it's Downey Games Fast Action Racing on the table this time. As we continue the 1991 Stock Car Project, we're up to race number 16, which took place at Pocono, Long Pond, PA. It was the Miller Genuine Draft 500, and that race took place on July 21st, 1991. That day, Alan Kowicki was the pole sitter, and Rusty Wallace in the number 2 Miller Genuine Draft car was the winner of the race. As you can see, it is a 2.5-mile tri-oval. And as far as modifiers to the contact and mechanical occurrences, contact is no change. So that means contact is about average compared to other tracks on the circuit, and mechanical is a +1. So the chances of a mechanical issue happening to you at Pocono are slightly less than some of the other tracks on the circuit. So before we set the field, let's take a look at the standings after race 15, which was at Daytona. And you can see rookie Bobby Hamilton is still hanging on to the lead, but now Davey Allison is only 2 points behind him. And rounding out the top 10 is Rusty Wallace, Harry Gant, Alan Kowicki, Sterling Marlin, Ricky Rudd, Jeff Bodine, Chad Little, and Bill Elliott. And Bill Elliott in 10th place is only 67 points off the lead. So this is anyone's contest right now. You know, we're only at the halfway point. Okay, and also the Dale Earnhardt watch. You know, we're keeping an eye on him because he was the real-life Cup champion that year. He is stuck in 14th place. That's 5 races in a row that he has remained in 14th place. So we'll see if he can improve himself moving on, or, well, we'll see what happens. Okay, and here is the, as you can see, the score sheet that I use to record things. So there is some bookkeeping involved in this game. It slows me down a little bit, but no worries there. So we're going to take the driver cards and give them a shuffle and set the field. And as I always mention, this grid is not a representation of position on the track, but rather it is an abstracted view of different events that occur on the track in different places and the drivers that are involved in these events. All right, so I'll give the cards a little bit more of a shuffle and a cut, and then we will set the field. So we got Ken Schrader, Dave Marcus, Kyle Petty, Alan Kowicki, Davey Allison, Michael Waltrip, Jimmy Spencer, Mickey Gibbs, Rick Wilson, Rick Mast, rookie and points leader Bobby Hamilton, Bill Elliott, Mark Martin, Ricky Rudd, Morgan Shepherd, Jeff Bodine, Larry Pearson, Jimmy Means, Richard Petty, Joe Rootman, Sterling Marlin, Chad Little, Harry Gant, Lake Speed, Derek Cope, Ernie Irvin, Ted Musgrave, another rookie, Dale Earnhardt, Stanley Smith, he's a rookie as well, Brett Bodine, Terry Labonte, Dale Jarrett, Hut Strickland, Rusty Wallace, Bobby Hillen Jr., and Darrell Waltrip. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is determine who the pole sitter is, and we'll take a look at Michael Waltrip here as an example. This 51-52 in that box, that is his pole position range. So we're going to roll these 2 dice, and we'll read the white die first. And if it was a 51 or a 52, that means Michael Waltrip wins, or has the pole. And it is a 41. So we'll look for 41 here. It's going to be Alan Kowicki. How about that? Who was the real-life pole sitter at Pocono on July 21st, 1991. So I'll write that down. Alan Kowicki. And he is going to immediately face a challenge. And that challenge is coming from 41, Dale Earnhardt. Okay, so for this challenge, and this initial challenge only, the pole sitter gets a +1 bonus. So that's going to make Alan Kowicki a 12. We're looking at the green race rating. And Dale Earnhardt an 11. So the challenge is at a -1. So Earnhardt needs an 8 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 4 and fails. And Alan Kowicki is the race leader. Okay, so now phase 1 is a mechanical check. We're going to randomly select a driver, and we're going to check to see if there's any mechanical issues. We'll select the driver and his 4 adjacent. Using the rules of priority, we'll be checking the red mechanical rating. And remember, here at Pocono gets a +1. And that is 62, Jeff Bodine. So it'll be Jeff Bodine. His 12 o'clock is Bobby Hillen Jr. His 3 o'clock wraps around over to King Richard Petty. His 6 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. And his 9 o'clock is Terry Labonte. So we're looking at the red mechanical avoidance rating, mechanical issue avoidance rating, as I mentioned, and here get a +1 at Pocono. So you need to roll less than the mechanical rating. If you roll equal, you're going to have a mechanical issue that forces you behind the wall, and you're going to go to several laps down and get a red lap marker. And if you roll greater than your mechanical avoidance rating, you are forced to retire. Okay, so first is Jeff Bodine. He's a 6. That becomes a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 6, and he passes. So Bodine passes. Next is Bobby Hillen Jr. He's a 7. That becomes an 8. He needs a 7 or less. And he, as well, just makes it. Rolls a 7, so he passes. Next would be Richard Petty. Petty is a 7. He becomes an 8. Needs a 7 or less. And he rolls a 9. Or excuse me, an 8. Yes, a 9. And unfortunately, Richard Petty is forced to retire. That's a fail. DNF. Okay, next is Rusty Wallace. He's a 6. He becomes a 7. He needs a 6 or less. And he rolls that 6. So he passes. And the last check is Terry Labonte. He's a 5. He becomes a 6. He needs a 5 or less. And he rolls a 3 and passes. So it was only Richard Petty who had a mechanical issue, and so after all that, Alan Kowicki remains the leader, and he's going to face another challenge. And we'll do that randomly. And that challenge is coming from 14, Joe Rubman. Okay, Rootman's a 9. Kowicki's an 11. Challenge is at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12 to be successful. He rolls a 3 and fails. And Alan Kowicki remains the leader. Okay, so now we're going to have, in phase 2, we're going to have a period of green flag racing. So we're going to randomly select the driver for adjacent, and they'll go up against Alan Kowicki looking at the green race rating, and we'll use the quality pass matrix. And that's a 43, Stanley Smith. Stanley Smith. It's 12 o'clock is Bobby Hamilton. It's 3 o'clock is Ricky Rudd. 6 o'clock is Rick Mast. And his 9 o'clock is Mickey Gibbs. Okay, we're looking at the green race ratings. So the first driver is Stanley Smith. He's a 2. Alan Kowicki is an 11. That is a -9. And unfortunately for Stanley Smith, that's an automatic failure. So he wasn't trying to take the lead, but he was trying to stay on the lead lap, and he failed to do that. So that's a fail and a green lap marker. And Alan Kowicki remains the leader. All right, the next check is Bobby Hamilton. He's a 10. Kowicki is an 11. This challenge is at a -1. Hamilton needs an 8 to 12. And he rolls a 10. And Bobby Hamilton, points leader, takes the lead. So that's a pass. And Hamilton is the leader. Okay, so now the next check is Ricky Rudd. Now remember, this is green flag racing. Rudd's an 11, Hamilton's a 10. Challenge is at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12, that is Rudd, to be successful. He rolls a 7, and Ricky Rudd's the new leader. So that's a pass, and Rudd is the leader. Next is Rick Mast. Mast is a 9. Rudd is an 11. This challenge is at a -2. Mast needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 7 and fails. And Ricky Rudd remains the race leader. And the last check is Mickey Gibbs. He's an 8. Rudd's an 11. Challenge is at a -3. He needs a 10 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls an 8 and is unsuccessful. And Ricky Rudd remains the race leader. Okay, now the first part of phase 3. Phase 3 is broken into 2 halves, I guess you'd say. And we're going to have green flag pit stops. So we're going to check, or excuse me, we're going to roll for a random driver. Is for adjacent, and they will be going up against the leader, which is Ricky Rudd. We'll be looking at the blue pit crew rating, and we'll use the quality pass matrix to determine the challenges. And that random driver is 54, Dale Jarrett. Okay, Jarrett's 12 o'clock is Morgan Shepherd. His 3 o'clock is Larry Pearson. His 6 o'clock, we have to pass Ricky Rudd because he's already involved in this. His 6 o'clock becomes Terry Labonte. And his 9 o'clock is Bobby Hamilton again. All right, so we're looking at the blue pit crew rating. Rudd is a 9, Jarrett is a 7. Challenge is at a -2. Jarrett needs a 9 to 12. He rolls snake eyes and fails miserably. So failed. Ricky Rudd remains the race leader. Now remember, these are pit stops under green. All right, so next is Morgan Shepherd. He is an 8. Rudd's a 9. Challenge is at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He fails as well. And Rudd remains the race leader. Next is Larry Pearson. He's a 4. Rudd is a 9. That's a -5. That's an automatic failure because of the -5, and Ricky Rudd still is the race leader. Next is Terry Labonte. He is a 7, Rudd's a 9. Challenge is at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 7, and he also fails. And the last check is Bobby Hamilton. He's an 8. Ricky Rudd's a 9. Challenge is at a -1. Hamilton needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 6 and fails. So after all the pit stops under green are done and everything shuffles out, Ricky Rudd remains the race leader. All right, now the next half of race phase 3 is a penalty check. We're going to check if there were any infractions during the pit stop, or pit stops, I should say, and we'll see if anybody's forced to make a stop and go. All right, so a random driver for that is going to be 61, and it's Rusty Wallace. So Wallace. His 12 is Jeff Bodine. His 3 o'clock wraps all the way around over to spot 1-1, and that's Ken Schrader. His 3 o'clock, or 6 o'clock rather, wraps up to the top, and it's Jimmy Means. And his 9 o'clock is Mark Martin. Okay, so we're looking at the pit crew rating again, but this time instead of using the quality pass matrix, we're going to just look at the pit crew rating, roll the 2 die, and you need to be equal to or lower than the rating to be good. If the die is higher, you've had an infraction and you're forced to come in for a stop and go, and you'll get a green lap marker. So the first check is Rusty Wallace. He's an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls that 8, so he passes. Next is Jeff Bodine. Bodine's an 8 as well. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 10. And Jeff Bodine had some sort of infraction. Came in for a stop and go, and he gets a green lap marker. So that's a fail, a green lap marker. All right, Ken Schrader is next. He's an 8 as well, and he needs an 8 or less. He rolls snake eyes. He's good. Pass. Next is Jimmy Means. Jimmy Means is a 6, so he needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 9, so he had an infraction. Who knows, maybe these two guys got together or something in there. And he fails. Green lap marker. And the last check will be Mark Martin. He's also an 8, as most of these guys were. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 9, and he as well gets a green lap marker. So he's 1 lap down, just like Means and Jeff Bodine. So that's another fail. He gets a green lap marker, and Ricky Rudd remains the race leader. And here, as we come to the portion between phases 3 and 4, there's going to be 2 back-to-back challenges. So the first one will determine who's going up against Ricky Rudd, and that's going to be 21, Chad Little. Chad Little is an 8. Ricky Rudd's an 11. Challenge is at a -3. Little needs a 10 to 12 to take the lead, and he does with a 10 take the lead. So it's a pass, and it's now Chad Little who's the leader. Now, because we have 2 challenges in a row, now it's going to be Chad Little facing a challenge, and that challenge will come from 63 Bobby Hillen Jr. So Hillen Jr. is a 10. Chad Little is an 8. Challenge is at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12 to be successful. He rolls a 9, and the lead is short-lived for Chad Little, and we have a new leader in Bobby Hillen Jr. So he passes, and it's Hillen Jr. who's the leader. Okay, so now we're into phase 4, and that's going to be a contact check. So we're going to see if any contact has occurred by selecting a random driver and 4 adjacent. And here at Pocono, as mentioned, there's no change to the contact checks. So that random driver is going to be 52. It's going to be Terry Labonte. Labonte's 12 o'clock is Ricky Rudd. His 3 o'clock is Jeff Bodine. Mark Martin is his 6. And Rick Mast is his 9. So we're looking at the yellow contact avoidance rating. You need to be less than that. If you're equal to it, you have to come in, go behind the wall, get some repairs done, and you're several laps down, and you'll get a yellow lap marker. And if you're greater than it, that is the contact rating, you're forced to retire. So the first check is going to be Terry Labonte. He's a 9. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 5, and he's good. So he passes. Next is Ricky Rudd. He's a 10. So he needs a 9 or less. He rolls a 6. He passes. Now it's Jeff Bodine. He's already a lap down. He is a 9. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 6. He passes, but he still remains a lap down. And Mark Martin, who's also a lap down. He's an 11. And he needs a 10 or less. He barely makes it with a 10. So he just avoided a scrape. Or just avoided a scrape. Now last is Rick Mast. He is a 9. Under his contact rating, he needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 7. So everyone passed the contact checks, and Bobby Hillen Jr. remains the race leader. Now, because there weren't any, there wasn't any contact, the second half of this phase gets an NA because there was no contact for there to be a pit stop. So there is no pit stop under caution in this phase, and we go to a challenge for Bobby Hillen right before we head into the final or the closing laps action. So Hillen remains the race leader, and he's going to face a challenge from 62 Jeff Bodine. So Bodine, it will be challenging Bobby Hillen to try to get back on the lead lap. So Bodine is an 11. Hillen is a 10. Bodine's challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12, and he'll pass Bobby Hillen and get back on the lead lap. And he does just that. He passes Hillen, and he's back on the lead lap. Of course, Bobby Hillen remains the race leader. So Jeff Bodine passes. Bobby Hillen remains the race leader. All right, now we're into the closing phases. And we're going to see if there's going to be another mechanical check, and this will just be the leader, Bobby Hillen Jr. So here at Pocono, in the last highlight event table, mechanical checks happen on a roll of a 5 to 12. So it's pretty likely that Bobby Hillen Jr. is going to be doing a mechanical check. And that is true because we roll a 6. So that's a yes. And it will be Hillen Jr. And he's going to perform a mechanical check. All right, so his mechanical rating is a 7, but here Pocono becomes an 8. So he needs a 7 or less to be successful. He rolls a 4, and he is successful and remains the race leader. Now he'll face another challenge. And that challenge is going to be coming from 54, Dale Jarrett. Jarrett challenging for the lead against Bobby Hillin Jr. Jarrett's a 10, Bobby Hillin Jr. is a 10. So Jarrett's challenging at a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 5 and fails. And Bobby Hillin Jr. remains the race leader. Okay, so now we're going to check to see if there was any contact late in the race. So here at Pocono, contact happens on a roll of a 6 to 12. And we roll a 6, so that's contact check is yes. It's going to be the race leader and adjacent cars to the race leader plus 1 random. So it'll be Bobby Hillin Jr. His 12 o'clock is Larry Pearson. His 3 o'clock wraps around at Dave Marcus. 6 o'clock is Jeff Bodine, who got back on the lead lap. His 9 o'clock is Ricky Rudd. And the random driver is 35, Rick Wilson. Okay, so this is contact. There's no change here. We're going to look at the contact avoidance rating. And you want to be less than that. So Bobby Hillin Jr. is an 11. So he needs a 10 or less. He rolls a 6, passes. So he's still in the lead. Next is Larry Pearson. Well, Larry Pearson's a 4. He needs a 3 or less. And unfortunately for Larry Pearson, he rolls an 11 and is forced to retire. So that's fail, DNF. Only him and Richard Petty so far have been forced to retire, but we have some checks to do yet. Dave Marcus is a 10 in the contact avoidance, so he needs a 9 or less, and he rolls that 9. Just avoids contact, so he passes. Jeff Bodine is a 9, so he needs an 8 or less. And Jeff Bodine, unfortunately, rolls an 11, and he's forced to retire due to contact, so that's fail, DNF. So now we have 3 DNF drivers. Next is Ricky Rudd. He's a 10. He needs a 9 or less. And Ricky Rudd rolls an 11, and he's out. Fail. Rudd is DNF. And the last check is the random driver, and it's Rick Wilson. He's a 7. So he needs a 6 or less. And he rolls a 9, and he's out. So we went from having only 1 driver out of the race to having 5. That was a pretty costly contact check. And after all that, Bobby Hillin Jr. remains the race leader. Now we're going to have a series of pit stops under caution. So this, because we're in the closing action phase, these are going to involve the leader and the 4 adjacent drivers to the leader. And we're going to be looking at the pit crew rating. All right, so we got Bobby Hillin Jr. Oh, and there's going to be 1 random as well. Okay, so his 12 o'clock is Darrell Waltrip. His 3 o'clock wraps around to Dave Marcus again. 6 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. It's 9 o'clock. Can be Stanley Smith because he's only 1 lap down, so maybe Smith, with a careful pit stop, can get back on the lead lap. So it's going to be Smith. And lastly would be the random driver. And that's 25. That's going to be Lake Speed. Okay, so we're looking at the blue pit crew rating. And they're going to go up against the leader. So that's Bobby Hillin Jr. So the first check is Darrell Waltrip. He's an 8. Bobby Hillin Jr. is a 7. Waltrip's challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12 to take the lead. And he does just that. So Darrell Waltrip is the new race leader. So he passes. And he is the leader. Now it's Dave Marcus, who is a 7, going up against Darrell Waltrip, who's an 8. Challenges at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 7, fails. Darrell Waltrip remains the leader. Next is Rusty Wallace, who's an 8. And so is Darrell Waltrip. Challenges at a 0. Rusty Wallace needs a 7 to 12. He rolls snake eyes and fails. And Darrell Waltrip remains the leader. Next is Stanley Smith, as I had mentioned. Now he's a lap down, trying to stay on the lead lap. But unfortunately for him, Darrell Waltrip's an 11 and Stanley Smith's a 2. That's a -9. And he is not trying to get his lap back. He's trying to stay 1 lap down, and unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So now he's 2 laps down. So that was a fail. And it's green lap marker ×2. And the final check will be against the random driver, which is Lake Speed. He's a 6. Darrell Waltrip's an 8. Checks at a -2. Or the challenge is at a -2. Lake Speed needs a 9 to 12. And he rolls that 9 and takes the lead. So we got a new race leader in Lake Speed. As we head out of the pit stops under caution phase, the new leader, Lake Speed, is going to immediately face a challenge. And that challenge will be coming from 61, Rusty Wallace. All right, Rusty Wallace is an 11. Lake Speed is a 6. That is a challenge at a +5 for Rusty Wallace. And as you can see on the quality pass matrix, that is an automatic pass. So Rusty Wallace passes. And the real life winner of the 1991 Miller Genuine Draft 500 now has the lead late in the race. Okay, so the next phase is pit crew check, but there is a note here: event void if pit stop under caution have taken place, and they have, because we did have contact here in the late phases. So this section gets voided, or is NA rather, so we'll just put NA here. Okay, and now we're going to see if there's any late race green flag racing, and looking at the last highlight event table for Pocono, that's going to happen on a roll of 7 to 12. So let's see if there's going to be some late race green flag racing. And we roll a 4, so that is a no. So this section as well gets NA'd. Rusty Wallace remains the race leader, and we're down to the final challenge. So the way the final challenge works is we take the race leader, and the 4 adjacent drivers cannot be lapped in this case. And whoever has the highest rating, using the rules of priority, will present that final challenge. So Rusty Wallace is 12 o'clock is Bobby Hillin Jr. He's a 10. His 3 o'clock is Ken Schrader. We have to wrap around. Ken Schrader is an 11. So we can see from here, since Ken Schrader's 11 beats Bobby Hillin Jr.'s 10 at 12 o'clock, the challenge is going to come from Ken Schrader. But we'll look at the other two drivers just to verify that. Okay, so Hillin at 12 o'clock is a 10. Schrader at 3 o'clock is an 11. 6 o'clock goes up to Darrell Waltrip. He's also an 11, so they're tied at 11. And then 9 o'clock comes over to Dale Earnhardt, and he's also an 11. So we had three drivers at an 11, Schrader, Earnhardt, and Waltrip. But using the rules of priority, with Ken Schrader being at the 3 o'clock position, he is going to present the final challenge. And that's how you resolve that, or that's how you make that determination here at the end of the race. So it's going to be Ken Schrader. And he'll be challenging Rusty Wallace here at the end. They're both 11, so this challenge is at a 0. It's a 50-50 shot either way. Rusty Wallace is trying to fight him off. So on a roll of 7-12, Ken Schrader passes Rusty Wallace and wins this race. And on a 2-6, it's Rusty Wallace holding off Schrader and winning the Miller Genuine Draft 500 just like he did in real life. So here we go. And it is a 7, and Ken Schrader passes Rusty Wallace here near the end of the race, holds Wallace off, and wins the Miller Genuine Draft 500 for his third win this season. So Schrader passes, and he wins the race. Okay, so now we get to what I always call the fun part. Ken Schrader is the winner, okay? So we're going to put this here. But we also need to put a marker over here for Rusty Wallace. So before we do that, let's just say, okay, Ken Schrader's the winner. He comes off first. The driver who lost the final challenge finishes second, and that's Rusty Wallace. Now I'm going to put a marker here for Rusty Wallace because he was the race leader, and we need to look at those other drivers who had the potential to be involved in this final challenge. So if we remember, Rusty Wallace was the leader at the time of the final challenge. His 12 o'clock is Bobby Hillin Jr. And he has a 10. So the 3 o'clock was Ken Schrader, who's the winner, so he doesn't count. The 6 o'clock is Darrell Waltrip. He's an 11, so he will finish third because he is at 6 o'clock. And the 9 o'clock is Dale Earnhardt. Now, I'm missing a driver here. 9 o'clock is Dale Earnhardt, so we should have 5 drivers off. So we got Schrader, Wallace. Oh, I forgot Bobby Hillin Jr. Bobby Hillin Jr. will be because he's a 10. He will finish 5th. I hope I made that clear. So we had to look at things from Rusty Wallace's position because he was the race leader. His 3 o'clock, or his 10 o'clock, excuse me, his 12 o'clock was Bobby Hillin Jr., who was a 10. The other 3 drivers were all 11, so they are all removed before him, and Bobby Hillin Jr. finishes 5th. Okay, so now we're done with that. So now what we do is from the winner's position, that was Ken Schrader, we go in a clockwise position and remove drivers based on their race rating. So we go to Kyle Petty, who's an 11, then Sterling Marlin, then Michael Waltrip, then Bill Elliott, Hut Strickland, Jimmy Means is lapped, Mark Martin's lapped. Okay. Jimmy Spencer and Chad Little are 8s. So now we look for 10s. No 10s, 9s. Joe Rootman. No 9s, 8s. Ted Musgrave, Jimmy Spencer, Chad Little. Okay, I can see there's only 3 drivers left on the bottom groove, and 2 of them are lapped. So the last one to come off would be Dave Marcus on that groove. So now we're going to move in. And we come in like that because it's the closest block to the leader. All right, so we come in, and that's going to be Alan Kowicki, Harry Gant, Davey Allison, Morgan Shepherd. And that's it for the 11s. Now we go to 10s from here. So we'll put that there. 10s be Dale Jarrett, Terry Labonte. 9s be Brett Bodine, Rick Mast. 8s, there are no 8s. There's 2 drivers left. We got Derek Cope at a 7, Lake Speed at a 6. So it'll be Cope, then Speed. Now we come in to the top groove and go clockwise, looking for 11s first. So it's going to be Ernie Irvin going around 10, Bobby Hamilton, and Mickey Gibbs. All right, so now we go back out to where the winner was, and we removed lap drivers based on race rating. So next will be Mark Martin. And then the only driver remaining in that groove is Jimmy Means. And the only driver remaining on the grid at that point is Stanley Smith. Okay, so we have everyone that was on the grid at the end of the race, and then we take the drivers who did not finish and put them on the bottom of the stack, and that's how they finish. So here at the in the replay for the Miller Genuine Draft 500 at Pocono Raceway in Long Pond, Pennsylvania. This race took place originally on July 21st, 1991. We got Ken Schrader with his 3rd win, Rusty Wallace, Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, and Bobby Hillin Jr. That's the top 5. And 6 to 10 is Kyle Petty, Sterling Marlin, Michael Waltrip, Bill Elliott, and Hut Strickland. So there you have it. Kind of think Bobby Hamilton is finally going to be dethroned as the leader, but we shall see. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. Ken Schrader, 3 wins, and he's been like night and day. He either does well, like wins 3 races, or has trouble and doesn't finish the race, or finishes low. Potentially Rusty Wallace, I think, could be the new points leader. Dale Earnhardt should definitely break out of his funk that has him stuck in position 14 for 5 weeks. But we'll see. I'll do the totals of this off camera and have them completed and have the new standings for the next time that we have fast action racing on the table here in the dugout. So that's going to do it for this episode. If you hung out with me, I appreciate it. If you stayed all the way till the end, I admire and appreciate your patience. If you just stopped by, I appreciate that as well. Although if you did just stop by and it wasn't here at the end, you probably aren't going to hear this. But all the same, I do appreciate it. And I will be back again in the near future with another replay video. And until then, take care.